The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. We heard from our General Manager, Adam Peters, today. He was at the NFL League meetings. This is the last time we will hear from him in a formal setting and capacity until the draft. After night one, he'll speak to the media, him probably along with Dan Quinn, as to why they did what they did in the first round, whether that's trade out of the first round altogether. If they do trade out of the first round, we probably won't hear from them until day two of the draft, which they will probably speak about why they made the decisions that they made in the first and the second and third rounds of the draft. That said, it was good to hear from him, kind of get his perspective on some of the things that they've done, right? We didn't hear from him after free agency, so wanted to hear about why some of the moves were made. Javon Kinlaw, the defensive line makeover, obviously trading for Deebo Samuel. We heard a little bit about that, but we really haven't had in-depth conversations from him as to why he decided to do that or trade for Laramie Tunzel. Is a Terry extension getting done? These were all topics of conversation, as you would expect. So let's dive in to what was said by Adam Peters. So he started off, first thing that was lobbed at him was from John Keim regarding Deebo Samuel. Why the move? Why did you decide to go get Deebo Samuel? And so it was pretty simple for him. He's like, I haven't been around many players that I've seen be able to take over football games. Deebo is one of those guys. He's a special athlete and he's a special human being. And that means a lot to them. I can't stress this enough. Being a good dude is just as important as being a good football player for them. They're not trying to bring, like, again, maybe 5 years down the road, when this is an established program, maybe they'll start being able to bring in guys that are a little rough around the edges. That's not what they're looking to do right now. You being a great guy and a great fit in that locker room is just as important as you being a great football player. So he said, look, I know Deebo. He said, I know you guys saw when he came. It was awesome. He brought his family with him. They were all excited. They were going to Disney World in Orlando. And he said that, you know, Deebo's a great guy and he expects big things from him here in Washington. And the amount of ways he can be utilized, he talked about Cliff Kingsbury's offense and more particularly the screen game in the offense and how Deebo is someone that you can get the ball in the hands of and he can do the rest, kind of make Jaden Daniels' job a lot easier. We talked about that ad nauseum this offseason. I literally talked about that, I want to say maybe a day or two after the Super Bowl was completed when we watched the Eagles dismantle the Chiefs. And I said, how do we close the gap? And one of the things I, went out and said, and then that prompted me to do the video that I said, we're either going to end up with Luther Burden III or Deebo Samuel. Why? Because those are guys you can get it in their hands and they can do the rest. We need more run after the catch. We don't have enough of that. The one guy that could do it at a high clip is no longer here in De'Ami Brown, and not like he was a world beater at it, but he was the best that we had. So you replace him with a guy that is among the best in the league at it, and it makes a ton of sense because it's something that we currently or did lack last season, was a guy that could really make something happen and make something out of nothing. And that's essentially what he said. And he said, look, we didn't have to give up a lot. He said the price was, relatively cheap, a 5th round pick. And so we knew what we were getting. And we felt really good about what we had to give up to get him. And it was a no-brainer, is essentially what he said. He then transitioned from there. Next question was asked, and it was addressing the pick situation right now for the Commanders. They only have 5, right? And the reason they only have 5 is because they've been aggressive in the trade market, trading for the aforementioned Deebo Samuel, trading for Laramie Tunzel, trading last year during right before the trade deadline for cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. So it puts you in a position where you only have 5 draft picks right now. And so he spoke about that. He said, look, I'm one of those guys that kind of allows the situation to unfold. And then if a situation presents itself that I feel like is good for this football team, for where they are and for where they're going. And that's the thing you can't forget, is a lot of times we live as prisoners of the moment. Like when Marshawn Lattimore didn't come in here and have an immediate impact, a lot of fans jumped off the bandwagon, and some of them are no longer on the bandwagon. He's going to have to prove to them that he can play. And I understand that there could be some apprehension or even a bit of, a sort of a sour taste left in your mouth from what you saw from him last year. I get that. But to just write that move off as a waste, they whiffed on that trade, we lost that trade, is asinine, right? Because that trade wasn't just made for last year. It wasn't just made with last year in mind. It was made with the future also being a part of why they did that. And he said, look, when you've got an opportunity to trade for the positions that we just traded for, and he talked about the emphasis being placed on those positions. Look, I tell you guys all the time, there are premium positions in this league, right? These are positions that you want taken care of. You don't want to lose sleep at night having to worry about these particular positions. Left tackle, quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback. Those are the premiums. And then you want to throw in wide receiver, knock yourself out. Okay? Knock yourself out. But edge rusher, tackle, cornerback, quarterback are premium positions in this league. And again, if you want to throw in a receiver as a fifth, knock yourself out. I won't argue with you. But those four aren't ones that you can debate. You have to have a quarterback in this league to compete at a high level, right? To win anything of note or substance. You need to have a left tackle. If you don't, you're going to have to do a lot of things structurally to make up for not having a reliable left tackle or right tackle for that matter, but left tackle in particular, if you've got a right-handed quarterback, which the majority of the NFL has, then you got to have, and that guy stops the guy that's trying to get to the quarterback. And that's a premium position because, again, the guy that's making the most money, someone's got to get after that guy. And then you got to stop the guys he's trying to throw the football to, and that's where you get the corner. So he said we had an opportunity to get a tackle, a left tackle, a corner, and a wide receiver. We couldn't pass up those opportunities. We saw those as opportunities to make our team better. And so he also talked about the trade situation and the draft picks, and he gave me a unique perspective. I hadn't thought about it in this light, but this is why the GMs are get paid the money they get paid, and they're wired a different way because they think about it in a different context than you and I do, right? Or let me just speak for myself. I didn't think about it in this way. So he said last year we drafted 9 players. He said then 2 undrafted guys made the team as well, right? Colson Yankoff and T.O., Tyler Owens. So he's like, that's 11 draft picks essentially last year, right? 9 draft picks, 2 undrafted. And then you got 5 this year, right? And again, he's like, that number obviously subject to change. It could go up, it could go down. More likely than not, it'll go up. He said they asked him, would he, trade up? He said, are the trades done? This is what they asked him. And he's like, I don't want to say that they're done, but, it's highly unlikely that I want to give away any more picks. I've already given away enough. But he said, I wouldn't rule anything out, right? Like if the opportunity presents itself, we think we can get ourselves a football player that can help us, and it's better than whatever. He made the comment about, getting Deebo Samuel and essentially saying you weren't getting Deebo Samuel in the 5th round, right? Like, I mean, that's a no-brainer in his estimation. Like, you weren't going to find Laramie Tunsil, more likely than not, and there's no guarantee that you wouldn't have, but the likelihood is you weren't going to find Laramie Tunsil in the 3rd or 4th rounds, right? And so he was willing to part ways with, what it took to get that done this year and next year, obviously, because these are positions that you want to lock up. But he said, you combine last year's draft picks, the 2 undrafteds that made it, and the 5 that we have currently going into the 2025 draft, that's a total of 16 picks. That's a full allotment for 2 years. So you don't feel like you're losing anything. I didn't look at it in that sense, right? Because you get 7 right? So if you would have just drafted 7 guys last year, you draft 7 guys this year, that's a total of 14. If you add in 2, undrafted, that's 16. So in his mind, he's saying, bro, the 9 from last year, the 5 from this year is 14. That's what we would have gotten if we didn't do anything. We just drafted where we were. That's a different way to look at it. That's not the way I personally would look at it, but I get it. I understand the logic if that's what you want to tell yourself to make you sleep better at night, right? So I still don't think we're going to end up with 5 picks. I've already said this. I think the number is 7. That's the number that most GMs want to come away with, if at all possible. It doesn't always work out that way. And he also made it a point of emphasis to 29 in particular, but just in general, he said, people always talk about trading up, trading back. He said, I always make sure I remind people that in order for you to trade back, somebody's got to want to come up. And I always try to remind you guys of the same thing. Like, so many fans always say, yeah, trade back, trade back. That's their favorite thing. If they can't get the guy that they want, no, just trade out of the pick. Well, that sounds good in theory. That sounds great. Yeah, hell, everybody would trade back. And Adam Peter said, hell, I'd trade back every time if I could. But somebody's got to want to come up. And the conversation's got to be right, because just because someone wants to come up doesn't mean they're willing to give you proper compensation. You're not going to just move back and allow somebody to fleece you and not get proper compensation. And then he even went as far as to say, okay, so, so say someone wants to come up, but in your mind, there's only one guy, that you really like that's left on the board. Are you going to move, or would you just stay and take that one player, right? He said versus there's 5 guys that you really like. And so if you move back 7 spots, more likely than not, one of those 5 guys is going to be there. You feel good about moving back, right? But if there's one guy that you like and you move back 7 spots, that guy could be gone, right? So you don't want to press your luck. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and that's essentially what he was explaining. He talked about mock drafts. It's funny, I didn't realize until maybe like 6-7 years ago that teams actually pay attention to mock drafts. Like, they factor that stuff in. I remember, when Mel Kiper first started doing it, the general managers hated it. And then over time, they embraced it. And then it just became a fabric of the draft. And it became a tool that they started to use. And I didn't realize this until about maybe 7-8 years ago, that teams actually factor that stuff in. Like, it's not the gospel, right? What Todd McShay is talking about, what Mel Kiper is talking about, what Mike Mayock was talking about, now Daniel Jeremiah. There's certain ones that they put more stock into because these guys are plugged into the league. They talk to some of these teams. They've gotten a sense of what these teams want to do. They don't necessarily know, but they know that this team is looking for this, or this team is really, really interested in that particular player or that particular position. And so he said, we factor all of those things in as to how we, go about our process. He says, we're sitting there at 29 and the 28th team in the draft. There's no way that they are going to take, a tackle, and then all of a sudden they trade out of 28 and somebody jumps in front of you and takes a tackle. So you can't always just go off of that, he said, but you never know how things are going to go. But he says they do kind of look at all of that stuff, which I found a little interesting. They then kind of shifted the conversation to free agency and why some of the decisions that were made. They started with the new defensive line mix, and asked him about Kinlaw, and then I think AP kind of then started to just talk about some of the guys that they brought in here and why they decided to bring those guys in. So a lot of the conversations surrounded Javon Kinlaw. He talked about Dietrich Wise and Jacob Martin and some of the other guys that they brought in along the defensive line that are going to help this team moving forward. Eddie Goldman, and, talked about wanting to be stouter up front. Obviously, I think anybody that has any football acumen can see what the emphasis was being placed on, the defensive line and why they brought certain guys in here. Moving on from Jonathan Allen, etc. He talked about Kinlaw in particular and how big of a human being he is. He talked about really getting to know Kinlaw, was happy to bring him back home. Kinlaw being from the DC area, obviously. He talked about his time in San Francisco with Kinlaw, seeing how he's kind of grown, overcome some adversity, was a starter early in his career, then got injured, had to battle back, and has done a really good job of it. He said that that with the Jets last year in camp, that was the heaviest he had ever seen Javon Kinlaw. And I think that was around like 330. And he said, I've seen him as low as 275. I've seen him last year at the Jets, training camp. Remember, we had joint practices with the Jets last year. He said, I saw him at 330 last year. He said he's one of the few guys that can make 330 look, chiseled. And he's like, this dude is a different animal. He sets the tone, is what he said. And he feels like, Kinlaw is going to come in here and really be a force for them. And, do they have a vision for him? Because Kinlaw himself said that he wants to cut some weight. He felt like super heavy last year. Now, he said he was immovable on the double team last year, but he also didn't feel spry and like himself in terms of using his athleticism to get to the quarterback and make plays on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So Adam Peters said they would like him to be around 320, 315. So if he, drops 10, 15 pounds, that's going to probably be right in the wheelhouse of where they would like him to be, which I assume is going to happen because Kinlaw himself said he wanted to do that. So I imagine that's going to be the case. But he said they can play him all around the defensive line. He also said we factored in that, our defensive line coach here coached him as an assistant defensive line coach, Daryl Tapp, in San Francisco. And DQ is a defensive line coach. So they're all very aware of what he brings to the table. And they really feel like Javon Kinlaw is going to be one of the centerpieces of that defensive front. Like, they're a lot higher on Javon Kinlaw. And people forget Kinlaw was a former first-round pick out of South Carolina. A lot of people thought he was going to be, this disruptive Eric Armstead type of, DeForest Buckner type of player when he came in. And he started off that way in San Francisco, got injured, and then it didn't, he never really regained that traction, so to speak. And so I think they feel like the best is yet to come for him. So I think they're a little bit higher on him. I know they're a lot higher on him than most people are, because that's where a lot of people saying that they overpaid for him, this, that, and the third. That's where that narrative comes from, because they don't think he is worth all of that. So they are extremely high on Javon Kinlaw. One of the questions that came up was about Deebo Samuel's weight. That's been like a topic that I just felt like was overblown. Even when he was in San Francisco, people made a big deal about his weight. When we traded for him, if you were a hater that wanted to try to downgrade the trade for whatever reason, the first thing, oh, he's washed and he's overweight and all that bullshit. And that whole narrative to me was dumb, because I don't think anything with his weight had anything to do with his play last year. He didn't play well at times last year. He dealt with the illness last year. That's when some of the weight came on. But going into the season, and I remember one of the beat writers for the 49ers saying this, Deebo Samuel was in tremendous shape. So I don't get too caught up in that. Deebo, dismissed it at his press conference when he joined the team and signed his restructured contract. And Adam Peters pretty much said, that's not a big deal for us. But, obviously every player, we have a, weight that we think is ideal for them, not just Deebo. And so you want them to hit that mile marker. You get with the strength and conditioning team. They're going to put together a plan to get you where you need to be. Got dietitians in the building. They're going to, also help you with that. And guys want to play at their maximum abilities and capabilities. Being at your ideal weight is going to help you with that. And he's like, I got no issues, whatsoever. Deebo's going to be in shape and he's going to be ready to rock and roll. So that was one of the conversations as well. He did talk about Terry's extension. We'll talk about what he said there. He talked about some more of the free agents. He talked about keeping the tight end room together. He also talked about Jaden's contract window and how they're looking to take advantage of that. All of these topics and more we will get to on the other side of this quick break that we'll take as we get a word from one of our sponsors. What's going on? It's your man Louie T here on behalf of House of Atlas. Now, before I start with this one, generally I don't endorse products that I haven't personally tested myself. But one of my guys was like, "Hey, you've got to try this product." I said, "Bro, I'm fighting the good fight. I'm not a bald-headed guy. I'm not a clean-shaven guy. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years down the line when I'm done fighting the good fight and I got to finally throw in the towel, I might be bald-headed at that point, and maybe this razor will be for me. But at this point, I'm still fighting the good fight, so I'm good." He's like, "Trust me on this one. You've got to try this razor." I said, "Tell you what, I'm going to give this a shot, but I'm not going to use it. I'm going to give it to my dad, who is bald-headed, and I know that's why I'm on borrowed time. And this is a guy that shaves every day. And I said, I'm going to let him test it out. And if he tells me he rocks with it, then you've sold me on this product." So gave it to my dad, told him to test it out and give me some feedback. And here's what he said. He loved the weighted handle. He said it felt good in his hand and it made for a great shave. He loved the 5-blade razor head. He said that it made for a smooth glide, and also it left no hair behind, is what he told me. Almost like no child left behind. He's like, it left no hairs behind, which is awesome. You know, clean shave, close. And he said it glided on his head very smoothly. I said, okay, cool. Sounds good to me. I also gave him some aftershave shaving cream that House of Atlas provided as well. And he said that was a home run. He loved the scent of the aftershave in particular. And he said the nice little cherry on top was the magnetic hook that it came with that you can put on your mirror or on your cabinet that will allow your razor to be held in it. So it came with a magnetic hook that you can just put your razor in for easy storage. I mean, that's a nice little parting gift as well. So don't take my word or Boss Man's word for it. Try it yourself. Head over to houseofatlas.com. Use the promo code LouieT to get you 15% off. That's right, houseofatlas.com. Use the promo code LouieT. HOUSEOFATLAS.com and use the promo code LouieT to get you 15% off their razor kit and before and after set. Once again, look, there are a lot of razors out there, but this one, House of Atlas, stands out amongst the crowd.
How to be an Atlas man. First, use your House of Atlas 5-blade razor for a closer, more refined shave. Then, carry in the groceries. All of them. An Atlas man never takes a second trip. Now, apply Atlas Aftershave. Greatness looks good on you. Welcome to Atlas.
All right, so he talked about Terry's extension, did Adam Peters, and he kept it vague, which you would expect. It's an ongoing negotiation. I think it's going to get done in July. I've already said this. It's deadline spur action. They want to get this done prior to the season starting. There is no real urgency right now. The cap space isn't urgent. There's nothing really in the way of forcing the issue. So I just don't see them getting it done until they have to. And I think that will happen towards training camp, right? Because once you get to training camp, then anything non-football related becomes a distraction. They don't want a distraction, so I think it gets done sometime in July. Now, I'm going off of how the last group handled it. I shouldn't do that with this group because I think, if I'm not mistaken, we either got into the season or we were in the off season like in the preseason in training camp when Sam Cosmi got his extension. I felt like we were early in the season when he got his extension. We were already playing meaningful football games, but whatever the case may be, it'll get done. He essentially said, we want Terry McLaurin to be a member of the Commanders for a very long time. Pretty much we want him to finish his career here, which should be the case. He's like, Terry McLaurin is an exemplary commander. He showed not only his leadership on the field, but off the field. He said Terry grew as a leader in the locker room, and that was fun to watch him grow from that aspect. But he said he also watched him grow as a football player and get even better. And he said sometimes you forget that great players can get better, but he said they watched Terry as that season progressed get better and better. And we saw that connection between he and Jaden grow stronger and stronger, and the plays just continued to be made between those two. And so we think the sky's the limit. So do they. And Terry's going to get paid, and there's nothing really to worry about there. He didn't get into particulars, but he said the conversations between Terry's camp and the organization have been positive, and I think something will get done. Like I said, I'm expecting it to get done in July, but I hope I'm wrong and it gets done sooner. But whether it's July, it's May, who cares, right? It's going to get done. That's all that matters. It's going to get done. Terry McLaurin's going to be a commander for a very long time. So then the next conversation was about some of the other free agents, specifically in the secondary. Jonathan Jones and Will Harris were guys that were pointed out as free agents that they brought in the secondary, which is going to look vastly different than it did a year ago. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Last year, going into the season, we had Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste, and Michael Davis all at the cornerback position, along with Jeremy Chin at safety. None of those guys are here, right? I just named 4 guys. 3 of those 4 guys finished the season with us last year. None of them are back of the 4 that I just mentioned. Will Harris is going to replace Jeremy Chin. Jonathan Jones is going to come in, and we don't really know where he's going to be, inside, outside right now, starter, reserve. We really don't know what his position on this team is going to be as of right now. And this is what Adam Peters continues to harp on. If we had to field a team and play a game tomorrow, we could, right? That has been something he's continued to say throughout this process when talking about free agency and the moves that they've made. If we had to play a game tomorrow, we feel good about the team we'd be able to put on the field, which is cool, but there's still upgrades that can be made, and that's where the draft comes in, and that's where all of the other, post-draft free agency and, after teams cut their players in their rosters down to 53 and all that stuff that still exists. But he talked about Will Harris in particular, and he said, Harris is an interesting guy. And then he said something that was funny to me. So Adam Peters says, man, the videos that fans put out on social media, they're great. And so, sometimes we ask ourselves as content creators and people who, they live in this creative space. We wonder, do they watch our stuff sometimes? And I don't know if they watch stuff like this, like, talking, right? But like cut-ups, highlights, my guy Ace One does a tremendous job with like highlights and putting together like the best of something. They do watch that stuff. Coaches watch that stuff. Like I think about when Jay Gruden would talk about scouting players for the draft, he would talk about the first thing he would do was turn on the highlights. If they don't pop in a cut up of their best plays, they got nothing for me, is what Jay Gruden would essentially say. So they watch that stuff, right? And he said, man, some of the work that people do out there is crazy. Because some of the, I'm not gonna lie, some of the videos they did for like Will Harris and in particular, not necessarily Jonathan Jones, but Will Harris in particular, because he's a physical player. He'll come down and he'll hit you in the mouth. Some of those hits, like the one that he put on the Falcons running back, they stick out. And so he said, man, those are great. But then he said, those guys represent our play style, right? They come downhill, they're fast, they're physical. they look like Commanders on tape. And then he talked about Will Harris in particular, because he said not only his time in New Orleans, but going back to his time in Detroit. And he said we had some insight there because of our assistant general manager, right? Who was in Detroit with Will Harris. And so he was like, we were able to lean on Lance Newmark for a little bit of insight there. And Lance, gave us the thumbs up. And so, it's funny because you forget about that kind of stuff, and guys kind of cross-pollinating and being in the same space at the same time. Like, that's part of the reason Javon Kinlaw's here. That's part of the reason, obviously, and not just because of Adam Peters, but because of the coaching staff, right? Guys having put their hands on Javon Kinlaw, having coached him, having seen what this guy can do, that makes a big difference, right? As to people vouching for them to be here. Will Harris is another example of that. Lance Newmark said, yeah, no, this guy is an athlete. This guy is physical. He fits the DNA profile of what we look for, and that's part of the reason why he's here. Jonathan Jones, he said, man, this guy is a professional. He's been there, done that. We've talked to so many people about this guy and the character that he has, but more importantly, the man he is off the field and what he can provide for this team on the field. So he felt really good about that group, and the free agents that they brought in, and how those guys are going to fit into the locker room and assimilate themselves. He talked about keeping the tight end room together. And he said, with Ertz, it was almost a no-brainer. He said, I know some people say he might have lost a step, but he said, he was often open last year, which he was. And much like Terry, I thought that Zach Ertz's connection with Jaden got stronger as the season wore on, and you could see them really forming this incredible bond, and Ertz knowing where to be, and Jaden, more importantly, knowing where Ertz was going to be and trusting him, especially in the red zone in critical situations. He was his security blanket. And I've always said the best friend of a young quarterback is the tight end, because it's the guy that's right in front of his face. It's the biggest target usually that he's going to have, because most tight ends are bigger than most receivers. And so it's just an easy guy that can show him his numbers and make himself a very accessible target. And Zach Ertz was exactly that for Jaden Daniels last year. And so he said it was a no-brainer to bring him back. And he talked about Ertz's leadership, similar to the way that he talked about Terry's, how that continued to grow and progress as the season wore on. And then he talked about bringing back John Bates, and he said, look, Bates is one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. And, I've told you guys this. It was funny because in the offseason, when Bates was about to be a free agent, I told you guys flat out, John Bates is welcome here and he's going to be back. And there were fans that swore me up and down, John Bates is not going to be back here. He's mid, Louie, and you don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, we'll see, right? Because most fans who are lay fans don't get into the intricacies of what value a guy like John Bates brings to the table, because John Bates doesn't have 54 catches for 627 yards and 8 touchdowns. John Bates is irrelevant to them, right? They don't understand the niche that he's carved out for himself and the role that he plays and what he provides for this team. And Adam Peters essentially said, look, man, he's like an extra offensive lineman. And what he provides for us, it's almost something that you can't measure. And he said, but we not only love what he provides for us as a blocker. This was what kind of caught me off guard a little bit. He said, we think Bates can be more as a pass catcher. I was like, hey, hold on a second there. Hold on, money. Hold on a second. He said, we told him when we signed him back that we think there's more to tap into in terms of you being a pass catcher. Remember, we were excited about John Bates, the pass catcher, when he came out of Boise, right? Bates can catch. That's not the problem. Bates can't run after he catches the ball, and he scares all of us shitless when he has the ball because he's been known to fumble, right? So there are, some underlying issues there, or at least PTSD on some of our parts with John Bates carrying the football, but John can catch the ball. So we're not going to act like John Bates can't catch. It's just we don't love what John does after he catches the ball. But he said they want to tap into that, and we'll see if they're able to do that. a lot of us are like, yeah, that's cool, tapping into John Bates, the receiver, but what's up with Ben Sinnott, the receiver? What's up with that, right? We'll see what happens this season. And then he talked about, he was asked about Jaden's contract window and if the moves that they've made, a lot of the 1-year deals, the trades that have been made, not really extending anyone out past that 2027 window, is that all in an effort to maximize the window but not put yourself in any kind of financial bind, knowing that the Jaden contract is coming around the corner at some point? And he was pretty much like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that, obviously, but yes, we understand, what Jaden being on a rookie deal does. It allows us to take on some of these larger contracts, like the Laramie Tunzel deal, like Marshawn Lattimore, like Deebo Samuels. It's easy to give a guy $18, $19 million in one season like we have. We're giving Deebo essentially, now they've lowered that number, right? Because I think that number is now 11 million or so after the restructure, but it's guaranteed money. And then there's a bonus in there. And so it looks a little bit different. The breakdown of it is different than just the 17 and a half. I think that was non-guaranteed for Deebo initially, but that was going to count once the season hit. It was going to count at 17. But that's a pretty significant number for one guy, right? I mean, obviously you see guys around the league with that kind of number all the time, but we went out and brought that in. We went out and got Laramie Tunzel and brought in a $20+ million salary, right? We went out and traded for Marshawn Lattimore, who's making like $18 million. So you can take on that kind of money when you're not paying your quarterback a massive amount, right? And they're aware of that. And he said, yeah, some of the 1-year deals, but he said that's also indicative of the market, right? Like you look around and if you don't necessarily love what's out there and you're not giving guys 3-year deals, right? They've been very selective in who they've decided to pay long-term deals to, right? Only one guy got a multi-year contract from us this offseason. That was it. Javon Kinlaw, right? Everyone else signed here on a 1 or 2-year deal. Okay. So I shouldn't say only one multi-year contract. Only one guy got a 3-year contract. Because I think there were 1 or 2 2-year deals. I know for a fact the special teams linebacker got a 2-year deal. So I'm not sure if there are many more guys that got 2-year deals. And Will Harris got a 2-year deal as well. I do know that for a fact. Just about everybody else, I think, signed 1-year deals. So, and he's like, yeah, no, we're aware, and that keeps us financially flexible, right? The word they love to use is optionality. He talked about that with the draft. He said the position that they put themselves in with all of these contracts. Yes, Bates did get a multi-year contract. I was talking about guys coming from outside, though. But yes, Bates did get a multi-year contract. Bates got a 3-year deal. But people that we signed from outside to come in here, I was thinking more along the lines like last year's free agency. Eckler got a 2-year deal. Louie got a 3-year deal. Biotis got a 3-year deal. Like these were guys on the outside coming in. We didn't do that this year, right? Just Javon Kinlaw got a 3-year deal. That was someone coming from another team into our organization. But yes, Bates got a 3-year deal. And he talked about how all of the signings that they've made, and I told y'all that the reason they went and did what they did this offseason and signed all is they wanted to put themselves in a position. I told you the signing that felt the most like this logic to me was the signing of Michael Gallup, because what it effectively did was it put them in a position where they don't have to do anything at wide receiver. They don't have to do anything at wide receiver. They still need another corner, right? They're not desperate for corner, but they need a corner, right? They don't need a receiver. We want them to draft a receiver. They don't need a receiver, though, right? We feel like they need an edge rusher. But because of what they've done in free agency, they don't need an edge rusher. Like, they got Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell is back. You got Jacob Martin. You got Javonte John Baptiste from last year. And you also signed Dietrich Wise. That's 5 defensive ends. You don't technically need an edge rusher. We want an edge rusher bad, right? Like, none of that gets you excited, right? But technically speaking, you don't need an edge rusher. You don't need a wide receiver, although we would really like to draft a wide receiver. You don't need a receiver. Them bringing back Chris Rodriguez, them bringing back Jeremy McNichols, technically, you don't need a running back. But boy, we'd be pissed off if they didn't draft one. We want one in the worst way, right? The only position that you can look at right now and say, bro, we need one of those is corner. We don't technically need anything else. And they've put us in a position where we don't technically need anything. Because you right now have 4 corners. You need 5. And again, Kayvon Seymour makes 5 if we're being, right? Like if they really wanted to play that game, hey, we got 5 corners, right? But we need a 5th corner. But technically, if we're going off of what I just said, technically you don't need a corner either. You got 5. Marshawn Lattimore, Mikey Sanders still, Jonathan Jones, Noah Igbenogany, and Kayvon Seymour. Technically, you got 5. You don't need a corner. Yes, we do. We need a corner. And we feel like that about running back, about edge rusher, and to a lesser degree, receiver, tight end, right? There are other positions that we feel like, no, we don't necessarily need it, but boy, do we want one in the worst way. But because of how they've gone about free agency, he said we pretty much put ourselves in a position where, we don't have to do anything. That's what they did last year too. So that's something to keep in mind. But he talked about Jaden's contract window, and he said that's what the trades were for, right? Taking advantage of Jaden. He said, we can't wait to pay Jaden Daniels, by the way. He said, well, we can't. I don't know if Mr. Harris is going to be excited about it, obviously, because Jaden's going to break the bank. But they want to be in the right position when everything takes place. But in the meantime, take full advantage of Jaden's rookie contract. And that's what they're trying to do. The presser ended with him being asked about Laramie Tunsil's extension and were there discussions? Have there been discussions? And he's like, no, there haven't been any discussions about it. But, if there had been, we were going to keep that in-house. So, again, Laramie Tunsil told us to our face, right, in his presser that they know where I stand. Translation, he's already made it known he wants an extension. They know that he wants an extension. Now, have those conversations with Laramie, because remember, he's his own agent, have those conversations already taken place? No, not yet. Because I told you, there's no deadline to get that done right now, right? There's no urgency. You're here now. We traded for you. We brought you in the building, right? You're one of us. We love you. We've shown you that. We'll get to more money being dished out to you down the road when that time comes. Right now, it's kumbaya. You're here. We're excited. We want you to get around your teammates. We got, these mini camps coming up here shortly. So that's all going to be fun. And then by the time we get to July, we'll be talking about a Terry extension. We'll be talking about a Laramie Tunsil extension potentially, yada, yada, yada. But again, that's when that time comes, right? So we'll see what ultimately gets done. But that was the extent of General Manager Adam Peters and his presser today with the local media talking at the NFL league meetings. He said also on Laramie Tunsil that he felt like we just got a top 2 or 3 pass blocking tackle in league. And he said also he feels like his run blocking is underrated. So he said one of the things they wanted to do was strengthen up the offensive line in front of Jaden, and they feel like they have done that. I would have loved to have seen a follow-up question to that of where do you envision he wasn't going to answer this. he wasn't going to answer this. But where do you envision Brandon Coleman playing after spending the entire season at left tackle last season? Obviously, he's not going to be there this year. So where do you envision him going? And I would have loved to have seen if he would have given us anything. He would have said something to the effect of, we're going to figure out what's the best situation for him, but we really see a bright future for Brandon Coleman. He would have gave us one of those type answers, but I would have loved to have seen, what his response to that would have been had he been asked that. But the question still remains, is it right tackle or is it left guard for Brandon Coleman this upcoming season? I'm leaning towards guard. I think while he's signing that restructured deal to give him some guarantees, that feels like a play at keeping him at right tackle. Coleman's best fit moving forward, we've said this, is guard. I still think that there's an outside shot that Cosme's ready week 1, but in the event that he's not, Nate Herbig could slide in there for the time being. Or Nick Allegretti, right? If you're going to start Brandon Coleman at left guard, put Allegretti at right guard, and you keep the party going, right? Until Cosme's ready to come back. And then you could have a very formidable, offensive line. You still would be looking for an upgraded tackle, right tackle at some point. But for now, you feel, damn good about that group if they can stay relatively healthy. So anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section and see what you guys have to say, and then we'll get out of here. My guy John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy JP writes, I listened to your stream on the running back draft class. I think Hampton is a top 5 running back in this draft personally, but if he falls to 29, I'd make that pick. I mean, Hampton's cool. I don't have any issues with him. I don't think he's as special as people are making him out to be. He's a good back, but personally, I don't see what all the fuss is about with him. He's got a lot of good traits. I don't see anything elite with him, however. But he's, like I said, the size, the combination of size, speed, he's got above average contact balance, all of those things. There's no wiggle. He's not making anybody miss. The long distance speed isn't great, but it's there, right? I've seen him run away from guys, but I don't know if that's a consistent thing. And like I said, the vision isn't great. The feet aren't excellent. He's good. Again, this is the thing about this draft class of running backs, and I've said this already, and I'm going to be repeating myself again when we start talking edge rushers. High end, the talent isn't through the roof, right? Like Genty isn't Adrian Peterson, okay? But Genty's really good, right? He's the best that this draft has to offer. I think there's a slight drop-off after him. But keep in mind, this is a unique draft of running backs because it's so deep. In a normal draft class, a number of these guys, we'd be talking about not necessarily as first-round picks, but we'd be talking about them being the first back taken off the board or the second or the third. These are guys that might not be taken until the 5th, 6th, 7th, running back off the board. In a normal draft, they'd be the second or third back taken off the board. But I really feel like Amarian Hampton should be a second-round pick. And I think the league is going to speak. And there's a chance that he could be a second-round pick. There's a chance he could be a second-round pick. I do think there are some running back thirsty teams, Chargers, Vikings, Cowboys, Raiders, that could make that situation non-existent in terms of him getting to the second round, right? An unlikely scenario because there are a number of teams that could use a running back. But I use that same logic that I've been using, which is teams see the value of the draft in the amount of running backs that exist. And instead of reaching for one in the first round, they say, we'll go get one in the second round. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Video channel. Thank you for being a member for 20 months. Who writes? Lou. What's up, video channel? Thoughts on Desmond Watson, and would you want him with us? I have no idea who that is. I wish I could be of more assistance to you, but I have no idea who Desmond Watson is. But if when I do find out who he is, I'll be able to give you my opinions on him. So sorry about that. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Video channel. Right. All right. Scenario. Your boy Riley Leonard available in the 6th round. Would it be smart ball to take him? Mario could follow Cliff next season. Good to have replacements in-house ready and developing. Isn't that what Sam Hartman is supposed to be for? I'm not, okay, so let me just be clear. I am not a Riley Leonard fan. He was a good college quarterback. To me, he does not strike me as a guy that is going to be anything more than a body in the NFL. There may be some other interesting guys in this draft at the quarterback position if you were looking to take a developmental quarterback, but I figured that's what Sam Hartman was going to be. Sam Hartman is not the athlete that Jaden is, and so could there be a little bit of but see, here's the thing. You don't need a young backup quarterback, especially for what we're trying to do. You just need a solid veteran option. You got Marcus back for 1 more year. I still think Jeff Driscoll is a really solid backup, quarterback. And in the event that Mariota wasn't here, I was prepared to move on with Jeff Driscoll. So I don't think you have to have a young developmental quarterback on your roster. I don't think that's a necessity, but that's what Sam Hartman's here for, right? I thought we established that already. Like, Sam Hartman's your young developmental quarterback. But I could be wrong about that, and he could just be here for moral support for Jaden. That's his boy. They came in together. He was comfortable with him, and they said, hey, why break up and mess up a good thing, right? Could be that too. But I just Riley Leonard is not a great quarterback, and I'm not big on Riley Leonard. I'd rather go after Tyler Shuck if you're going to do something like that, right? Big guy, big arm, athletically gifted, so you could run all the stuff that you do with Jaden. I'd rather do that than go after Riley Leonard. So, yeah, and look, this staff could look vastly different next year, but we don't have to have that conversation right now. But they've prepared themselves, which is why they kept all of those coaches in-house, because they understand that with success comes changes, right? People are going to come poach your coaches, and some of your players when you have success. We had success last year, and people wanted to take some of our coaches from us. Cliff Kingsbury could be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints right now if he wanted to, and he's like, nah, I'm good. The Jacksonville Jaguars tried to interview our assistant QB's coach, right? And we said, nah, he's staying right here, right? Swatted that attempt out of here. So trust me, the time will come where we get some of our coaches poached from us. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy, C-Mac, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. As always, my guy, Chris writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always. He says, question. 1, how much better is the defense objectively, talent-wise, compared to the NFC Championship game? We switched Ken Law for Allen, Harris for Chin, and added Jay Jones as another corner. That's the $1 million question, right? On the surface, the things you just named are the things we're going to pay attention to, but they added depth, something that we lacked. I keep bringing up the fact that in the NFC Championship game, we had what's the name of the dude that was number 91 for us last year? Why? I don't know why I can't remember his name, but he was playing meaningful. He played like 30% of the snaps at defensive tackle for us last year. Like, that's not okay. All right. We were hurting on that defensive line. Remember, there was no Daron Payne in the NFC Championship game. He couldn't play. He got injured and he couldn't go. So I personally can't answer that right now. Like, are we better? Is Will Harris better than Jeremy Chin? Don't know. Is Jonathan Jones an upgrade over Benjamin St-Juste, Michael Davis, etc.? Probably so. I can't imagine him being any worse than those guys were. So yes, I'd say that's an upgrade right now as we stand. That's an upgrade. But the defensive line is the million-dollar question. Can we stop the run better? Sure, we should be able to with Eddie Goldman, with Dietrich Wise, with Javon Kinlaw. We should be able to stop. Can we get to the quarterback, though? Better? That remains to be seen. Right now, it doesn't feel like it. But again, how are we to say what Jacob Martin? Jacob Martin could have a career year here next year, right? Jacob Martin could come in here. He's never had more than 3.5 sacks, I think, in any given season. And Jacob Martin can go off for 9.5 sacks next year. That's a lot for him. That's a good number for anybody, let alone a dude who's never had more than 3.5, 4 sacks in a season. So, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. But right now, it doesn't feel like it. So to answer your question, on paper, I'd tell you that this defense is better. On paper, yes. I'd tell you it's better right now. But these games aren't played on paper. So we'll see. What I'm banking on is for most guys that are back defensively, it's another year in the scheme, or more comfortable with what they're asking you to do. For the staff, having had these players now for a full year, now you know what they're capable of. So now you know what to ask of them. And I think you then build upon that, right? Bring in some guys that you think will help accentuate the strengths of the guys that are already here, kind of fit in as puzzle pieces to the mix, and then you go from there. But right now, I'd say, yes, the defense is better. But how much better is the question? And if you think it's worse, how much worse could it possibly be? How much worse could it possibly be? Right? Carl Davis. Yes. Thank you. Truth be told, it was Carl Davis who played way too many snaps in the NFC Championship. That's not okay. Carl Davis won't even be here next year. Like that's the position we put ourselves in. And like I said, it almost felt like overkill. But when Carl Davis is playing over 30% of the snaps in the NFC Championship game, you need to really build up your depth on the defensive line so that never, ever happens again. And that's what we've done. So I do think it's a better group right now. But again, they're not done adding to the mix, and time will tell just how much better they are, right? So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will turn our attention to the edge rushers as we turn the calendar to April and we close in on the 2025 NFL Draft. We'll start edge rushers tomorrow. That will be 2 volumes. We'll get through them quickly so we can head to the next position, and we'll continue to be aggressive in attacking this draft. Also, Louie T Network podcast episode tomorrow as well. So with that said, I'm going to glide to the side, allow you guys to get back to whatever it was you were doing before I rudely interrupted. Look forward to chopping it up with you all throughout this week and really getting to the meat and potatoes of this draft and talking about all kinds of topics under the sun. If you are a fan of the Louie T Network podcast, lots to discuss. Looking forward to doing that with you tomorrow. Until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a great rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless and good night.